Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So this time around I'm going to be updating my tier list slightly earlier this month because I do feel fairly confident talking about the newly released champions, even though Quicksilver hasn't even had his early access bundles yet and we haven't seen CCP videos. Still, we have had the 3-star to play around with, and Galen obviously is already in the game also. Right, before we get any further, the automatic disclaimers: this list is a mixture of my personal views of the game and current game relevance and trends. Please do not use this list as a point of argument, but more as a food for thought. Each summoner has different needs and preferences that far outweigh the importance of this list. Please rank champions that will help you get where you are trying to go, and do not blindly follow this type of list. What do I mean by that? I always believe in goal orientated rank ups, as in, like, if you are struggling in Alliance Quest, rank up a champion whichever is going to help you clear your paths in Alliance Quest. If you need better Alliance War defenders, rank up Alliance War defenders. If you need something for general questing and survivability, rank up for that specifically. If you need something for a specific variant, rank up that champion. All that being said, also keep in mind that we all have different playstyles. We prefer running different mastery setups. We have already ranked up different champions, and it's good to avoid redundancies as often as possible, and all that other good stuff. So this list features all the champions that are out as 6 stars. The champions that are not available as 6 stars have their own mini list at the bottom here, but we are not going to discuss that separately. Right, and let's break down each categorization. Top of the game means basically the best of the best. Top of the game means those champions that you ought to rank up pretty much immediately, that every well-developed roster should ideally have access to. Those champions that you grab and you know that they are more than likely going to be great for most of the game modes. Like, if you bring in Hercules, you can bring him in Alliance War, in Alliance Quest, you can do questing with him, you can do Everest content with him, he's good in background, so on and so forth. Obviously, not all of these champions are excellent in every single game mode, but that's typically the indication that these champions are present in the most competitive aspects of most of the game modes. Meta is just a tiny bit step back. Meta are still champions that are the most popular, the ones that people tend to use most often whenever dealing with variety of different threats. These are, again, the champions that you will typically see ranked up in majority of the larger rosters. These are the champions that are capable of tackling large swaths of game and different scenarios in the game, and they will be great more often than not. Frequently useful is highest category typically I award to any newly released champion, because by definition they cannot necessarily be meta. This month I am stepping away from that, but the point of meta and top of the game is that those are established champions that have proved themselves in virtually all of the content already, and those are like the most popular options. When it comes to frequently useful champions, amazing champions that can do a ton of great things. Often they specialize in like couple of things where they are exceptional and outstanding, and some of the other things they might necessarily be, the go-to options for a ton of people. For instance, we have Strife, that's exceptional in Everest content, but in a casual questing scenarios, don't necessarily bring him as your first option. Or we have Thing, that has very important uses in the game, like be that in against some very stacked opponents, or be some specific nodes where he's just incredible. Typically these champions, again, are very, very good, very popular. Many people's favorite champions are here, and they can do awesome things. It's just that they're not necessarily awesome in as many places as the champions that are listed in the higher tiers, or maybe not as many people have fully invested in them and believe that they can do it. They haven't necessarily sold themselves, but they still, without a doubt, have plenty of space and usage throughout the contest. Useful champions is just, again, like a name implies, champions that can be useful in a variety of situations. They might not necessarily always will be the champions that you are looking for. They might necessarily be the options that you are trying to use from top of your head. Still, many people's favorite champions right here. And there is, again, none of this tier list is meant to be a bash on any of the champions. They are champions that, again, are good for some stuff, not great for other things. And if you have a bigger roster, well worth the rank up. Might not necessarily, again, be the first choices for a specific problem, but you can get your use out of them. Occasionally useful is just that. Champions that typically are lacking in one way or another in majority of the circumstances. Again, with these champions, still there can be situations, there can be circumstances where they are virtually the best option or some of the best options for specific things. Again, many of these champions typically often can be also some excellent defenders, for instance, and then just, you know, subpar attackers, which frequently seems to be how Kabam is distributing the champion usefulness. Like we have Man-Gogs and Man-Things in here. Great defenders, not as great defensively. But still, nothing wrong in enjoying these champions either, or playing with them or ranking them. I myself have a ton of champions from occasionally useful list ranked. Carnage, for instance, is one of my favorites. I find him incredibly fun to use. I have him at rank 2. I have Terex at rank 3. Again, not the greatest, but good amount of fun and can have its uses. Recently took out Mr. Sinister again for Alliance War defense. And as I said before, Man-Thing, Man-Gog, I have those champions ranked up again, mainly for defensive purposes. There's nothing wrong with these champions or the fact that you like them. It's just that they are not necessarily always the best options for the problem. And the last tier is basically the champions that are either outdated or have kind of been flops. It's quite as simple as that. We have our Black Bolts and Airwalkers and Novas and Thanoses and superior Iron Mans. Typically, that these are either very old champions or champions that just didn't quite stack their landing in the contest and are rarely considered to be amazing pulls, for instance. Some of these champions still have people that, you know, will swear by them and can get great use out of them, but that is much more to do with the players being great than the champions being great. Either way, let's get to most important things. So first, we need to talk, obviously, about the newly released champions and the buff. And therefore, we're going to start with Juggernaut, who I have currently moved into useful tier. And I initially had an inclination to potentially move him slightly higher, but I do think for now he has to live in useful tier. Whilst I do believe that Juggernaut now has potential to be, you know, frequently used champion by ton of player base. He's extremely fun, access to virtually uninterrupted sets of Unstoppable throughout the entire fight, which can be extremely useful. Access to Nullify if you have him awakened, damage mitigation, and, you know, several other interesting things in his kit. The thing that bothers me most about Juggernaut, and thing why I don't really think he's gonna end up flying much higher, is his innate weaknesses. Now, we all know that now when you inflict a debuff, non-damaging damage over time debuff on Juggernaut, you basically lose all of his abilities. And there are many things that really bother me about it, and especially because I think Kabam kind of had a major oversight. Now, the fact that there would be some nodes that he's incompatible with, that's perfectly fine. You know, you don't need to use Juggernaut always and all the time. Or the fact that majority of the science champions just casually would switch him off. So, for instance, if you ever hit a Immortal Abomination's block, if you ever go up against Anti-Venom, if you ever hit Captain America's block, so on and so forth, I get that. These are science champions. You know, they are meant to be good against Mystic champions, and Mystic champions are not meant to be great against science champions. So the fact that many science champions will easily and frequently place non-damaging debuffs on Juggernaut and switch him off and make him a noodle, fine. We can live with that. Not a big problem. The biggest problem that I really am annoyed by, though, is the Cosmic class. Because now we have Airwalker, who's going to be constantly putting on damage or non-damaging debuffs on Juggernaut. We have Angela, who's going to be switching off all of Juggernaut's abilities whenever she throws special attack. Annihilus, whenever you end up blocking, you're going to have your stifles and armor breaks. We have Captain Marvel Movie, whenever you're going to end up taking some hits and block, you're going to have that. You're going to start fight with armor break against CGR, therefore, again, you're going to have a slow start in that fight. And there in total are about like 9 champions in Cosmic class. Hercules is going to be consistently switching off Jugs just by dashing back, for instance. Icarus is going to be switching off Jugs, you know, just whenever Juggernaut uses a light attack, I believe. Null, obviously, whenever you parry. And you guys see where I'm coming at. There are just so many Cosmic champions that are going to completely shut off Juggernaut. And that really, really doesn't sit well with me. I think that buff would have been so much more effective if they just gave him some sort of exception against Cosmic champions, or made that as a rule specifically against Science champions that you can use, or something else. I don't know. The fact that he's weaker defensively now by himself doesn't really bother me much, because he might be weaker now defensively without nodes, but if you give him like debuff immunity and stun immunity or some other nodes, then he can still be a major pain in the ass on defense. And again, just the whole setup of new Juggernaut I do enjoy more. The thing that I really don't get is, I don't think Kabam thought through how many champions are going to be switching off all of his offensive capabilities, how and frequently, and the fact that many of them are going to be Cosmic champions. So really, really could irk me. So that's where he lands for now. We'll see how all of that plays out. We'll see how relevant that is. Again, I'm not completely opposed to promoting him in future if we do see him being used in, you know, Alliance Quest, Alliance Wars, Battlegrounds, or just, you know, general and top tier content like for Eternity of Pain fights and stuff like that, or Act 8 for instance. But he's gonna have to earn that promotion, and yeah, I'm kind of annoyed by that buff. I loved it at the start, but the more I started messing around with it, the more annoying situations and circumstances came up where he was just borderline unplayable. Right, moving on. We have Galen, that I'm going to be putting in meta section, because it's very hard for me to see him not being there, if that makes sense. It's very hard for me to see any set of events playing out where Galen is not a frequently used champion at virtually all of the levels of the game. Now, Galen's biggest downside, without a doubt, is the fact that his base damage is really horrible. Unless you can close in that harvest and do your burst damage, you're going to be struggling a lot. Therefore, any fight where you struggle either throwing or using special attacks or dropping heavy attacks is going to be tricky. So there are ways around Galen, obviously, but at the same time, giving him immunity to all of those power controls, giving him immunity to nullifies and fate seals, not that they would even kind of stop, because as long as you proc the buffs, then he's still filling up for harvest. And just from what I have seen so far, I genuinely do believe that he is a very, very good Cosmic champion, is going to end up somewhere in top 10 in the Cosmic list whenever I redo that in the near future. I can see him being used in Battlegrounds, I can see him being used in Alliance War, I can see him being used in Alliance Quest. The fact that he has access to plenty of debuffs via the Incinerates if need be, he has access to criminal amounts of buffs. He has obviously the pre-fight, which he can bestow upon Cosmic champions, even though I think it's hard from the most relevant part about him. I think he's a very powerful champion, and if I overestimate him, obviously I will be quick to demote him. But again, as I said before, it's very hard for me to see a situation where Galen isn't at the forefront of this game in multiple game modes. That being said, pretty much the same can be said about Quicksilver. Now, I know that Quicksilver is technically not in the game yet properly. We only have access to the 3-star version of Quicksilver, but just going through the sheer amount of utility that he has virtually consistent, persistent access to, it's quite ridiculous. So he has access to slow, which prevents evades and unstoppables. He is bypassing miss. He is reversing power gain. He's inflicting a ton of debuffs, therefore he's going to be shutting off all the heal. Also, he doesn't get any buffs outside of nodes putting buffs on him or champions putting buffs on him which immediately lets him bypass stuff like EMP modification, like Burden of Might, which lets him work around a ton of, power snack type of nodes, buffet type of nodes. It's just, again, on sheer paper alone, obviously, for everything that I have seen, he counters so many aspects of the game that I fully do believe that within a couple of months, once people do have better access to him, and once people get actually used to those wild 13-14 hit combos, he's going to be mainstay in science class and mainstay in this game. Again, giving him all the withers, all the debuffs, the trauma debuff as well to increase his damage, and then ability to counter, miss, unstoppable, evade, power gain. It's just quite silly. I mean, it's silly in a good way. But I do think he's going to be extremely, exceptionally good. A lot of people have been asking me which one I kind of prefer more at the moment in between Quicksilver and Galen, and whilst it's, hard to draw some sort of definitive conclusions, at the moment I'm still looking at Quicksilver as the more valuable of the two, because I think much of what Galen does, a lot of Cosmic Champions, or many Cosmic Champions, can do relatively similar. Maybe aside from that big burst damage, but again, it's just damage. It's how you apply it. But when it comes to Quicksilver, there's so many counters to so many different champions in the game, and that extended evade window obviously is going to be just increasing the safety of the character. And then again, as I said, all of the other abilities that he has are quite bonkers, in my opinion. And obviously his damage detonations are huge too, so I don't think he's going to be lacking in the damage department. So yeah, I do think he's going to be mainstay in the game, and is likely going to join top of the game list quite soon. One of the highest amount of expectations on a newly released champion that I have personally placed on any time recently that I can recall. So there we are. Another couple of changes. I heard actually commenting on Venompool and Venom that they hardly see them used in competitive aspects of the game anymore, and I have to agree with that. 100% usage of Venom and Venompool has decreased. I do think it has to do with several factors, and keep in mind that tiers of the champion do change with the current game trends. That means that when new champions come out, if they can make some older champions obsolete, if specific content gets created and that doesn't let champions shine, that obviously also can play an impact. Like I explained it before with Aegon, like Aegon is taking a significant hit in terms of what content has been released from story perspective, because in Act 6, health pools were bigger, paths were longer, and made sense often to use Aegon, for instance. In Act 7, we have shorter paths, means less time to ramp up Aegon. We have tons of damage multiplier nodes, which means there wasn't much of a need for Aegon's damage on many of his abilities, and just made it kind of not worth running Aegon for a ton of stuff. And also nothing new in terms of, major Everest type of content. However, many people were reminded about Aegon with the release of Grandmaster's Gauntlet. It's just a quick example of how champions value can easily alternate. But if you're gonna, for instance, get a new version of Abyss of Legends, and Aegon's gonna be best for it, everybody's gonna be on the Aegon train again. And that's natural. The game has these periods where some champions go up and down and up and down. Right, that being said, I do think Venom and Venompool both are at the moment on the decline. Partially due to the fact that, the latest Spider characters don't really evade, and there's not much to counter in them. They're mainly offensive champions, and we don't see Spider-Man kind of dominating Alliance war defenses or, Balgron's defensive placements, and they just don't seem to be at such a forefront of the contest. At the same time, some of the best uses for Venom and Venompool up until recently were against Penny Parker, but now we have Hulkling that deals with Penny Parker extremely well. We have Galen that deals with Penny Parker extremely well. Even like Gore that got released deals with her very well, so on and so forth. So we get more and more counters that are actually proper and quicker and snappier counters for, you know, you not to have to rely or use Venom or Venom Pull. Battlegrounds opened our eyes on how well Silver Surfer can destroy Penny Parkers, for instance, and in many situations, yeah, these champions are taking it a bit on backseat. Now, I do think both of them are still phenomenal champions, potentially the most valuable champions for variant content, but again, variant content is just not relevant really anymore for a significant portion of player base. If you're looking specifically for variant champions, then yeah, Venom and Venom Pool are still the best rank ups ever because they cover most variants of them all. But again, it's just not that important at the moment. And for most of the newer content, for stuff that is Eternity of Pain, Grandmaster's Gauntlet, Alliance War, Alliance Quest, Battlegrounds, Act 7, potentially Act 8, they're not at the forefront there. So I did take them out of meta tier. I pulled them back to frequently useful. A couple of champions that I pulled up, and there are some promotions as well. So Rintra and Wiccan both went up. So Rintra has been making waves for sure. I initially started Rintra off in useful tier. Now Rintra and Wiccan are placed in frequently useful because Wiccan has been doing some extremely crazy stuff, especially in Alliance War and some Alliance War boss fights. And I think a lot of people are still unaware of how crazy this guy can be, should the circumstances align perfectly. He is a champion with inherently plenty of weaknesses as well, though. Some of them being like a very ridiculously small health pool and negative physical resistance. However, it doesn't mean that he immediately feels like an absolute glass cannon, because his block proficiency is quite decent, and that is something that he has quite common with Professor X, where if you do get hit, your health bar disappears fast, but if you don't get hit and you just block a bunch and parry, he holds up quite well. And Rintra is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, where Rintra is just an absolute tank. He's crazy good offensively, crazy good defensively. He's neutralized, again, rivals the neutralize of Tigra. And in general, he has access to plenty of damage and utility, and people are kind of waking up more and more to Rintra. Potentially, my next rank 4 actually is going to be Rintra. So for now, I'm going to place Rintra in frequently useful, but again, I do think that both of these champions could potentially end up earning a slight promotion to meta. I would not be surprised too much about that. And I think that's kind of pretty much it about the main changes. I'm keeping Gore in the useful tier at the moment, even though I took mine to rank 4 for Alliance or Defense. We'll see how, you know, I feel the character is performing around the rest of the game. I also obviously want to take off my Liquid Courage and Double Edge to check out how he's playing without them, which in theory should be better. But we'll see about that. And Agent Venom, I have seen a lot of talk. I could push Agent Venom higher, but I still definitely have a lot of reservations on the practicality of it. Agent Venom has crazy amount of damage. I probably do have to finally make a video of synergies with Scorpion and Kraven, because in those situations, yes, he is a crazy damage dealing champion. However, also after doing some testing with Agent Venom, number one, you ideally want obviously the champion to be able to be bled and incinerated. And that's kind of like a bigger trick to it as well, because majority of damage comes out from your incinerates, not your bleed. So even if you are able to bleed the champion, you can't incinerate it, still lose vast majority of the damage that you're going to achieve there. So obviously that's far from a major downside, but again, combining with the fact that you do have to have a very specific team involving Kraven and Scorpion, which isn't much of a downside, it's still a setup that will often be unavailable. For instance, I doubt that you can run that setup. In fact, I know you can't run that setup in Eternity of Pain, even though on paper, for instance, it would seem, you know, 3 champion slots, you need to deal with it, but again, when you need select specific counters, you just can't afford the luxury of having a quote-unquote Trinity type of team to be brought in. Same thing often will go for Alliance Quest. For many parts that people are taking, you will just be unable to use this champion. And it's going to go for Alliance War, and it's going to go for Battlegrounds. So realistically, I do think that occasionally Agent Venom is gonna pop his head in Alliance War situations where you can, work around and specifically assign fights and paths that, all fit for Scorpion or Agent Venom. But I also see this setup being mainly practical only in questing situations. I don't see, many Alliance quest teams being run with Agent Venom. I don't see many Alliance War teams being using this Trinity. Obviously, it's going to be completely irrelevant for Battlegrounds. And a bunch of different game modes or challenges, like Eternity of Pain, for instance. So I think overall, because of that, he belongs there. He can be exceptional. He can be amazing. He can be crazy when he's at full power, synergized up. It's just that you're not going to be able to do that against the most important and hardest fights. Right, other than that, I think it covers everything. Let me know if you guys have any more questions. And I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next